Hello, hello, hello. We are live. Today is January 12th. And today we're going to be talking about IRS letter CP 261. And you're like, what the heck, right? Um, it's crazy how many times I've worked with self employed barbers, braiders, hairstylists who they come to me for tax services and they'll say either that they are taxed as an S Corp or they'll ask like, "Hey, can you help me make the election? Like, I do want to be taxed as an S corp." And um, it always surprises me how many people do not have proof that they are taxed as an S corp, and this can really kind of mess up things a lot. So, give you some examples. So, there was a hairstylist out of North Carolina that I was working with, and she before she was working with Hair CEO, my accounting firm, she was working with another firm, and they were filing S corp tax returns for her, and then all of a sudden she this was actually one of the reasons why she decided to leave was because she received a letter from the IRS basically telling her like, hey, can you please stop filling out these S corp forms? You're not an S corp. And she was so confused. She was like, well, like that's weird. Turns out she was never taxed as an S corp. Had another situation where woman came. This was a client, a stylist out of New Jersey, and she was like, "Oh, I need to file, I need the election, like I need to become an S corp." And but then a few hours later, she was like, "Oh, wait a minute. Turns out I am taxed as an S corp." So I'm like, "Wait a minute. How do you not know that you're taxed as an S corp?" So if that's the case, you're gonna know by the end of this video. You're gonna know if you are taxed as an S corp and what needs to be done as a part of making that election so that you are, playing within the rules. So, welcome. My name is Jennifer Drew. If this is your first time here, this is actually day 12 of my series of 2026 Tax Talk. I'm doing 90 days where I'm coming to you live in an effort to really just help simplify taxes and talk about different things related to taxes before the tax filing season really kicks off. I am the founder and CEO of Hair CEO. It is a business advisory and accounting firm catering to self employed hair professionals and hair business owners, helping them run legitimate, profitable, and bankable businesses through bookkeeping, accounting, and tax services and coaching. So, again, we're going to just jump right on in. So, the first thing I want to show you, because it's easier to show you, if you have requested the S Corp election, whether you've worked with an accounting firm or maybe you went through a third party, to do it yourself, you will know if you have been accepted, right? There's two parts to this. The first one is requesting to be taxed as an S corp, but that does not guarantee that you are. So you don't need to just make the assumption like, hey, I mailed this off, I'm good. No, you want to be sure that you get what's called a CP 261. And let me show you what that looks like. Okay, let's see. So this one, I'm going to this. So this is redacted, but this is, and redacted means just blacked out sensitive information. But this is a real, S corp election form, CP 261, and you'll see here that in big bold letters, you will be treated as an S corp starting January 1, 2024. That right there is what lets you know, okay, I am taxed as an S corp. It's been accepted by the IRS, and it lets you know the date for when it starts. Very important because that information is going to be needed for the actual tax return. And then there are some little notes here that you have to keep in mind. So the first thing is that you have to determine a reasonable salary. A reasonable salary if you provide services to the company. So in your business, if you are a hair professional and you work behind the chair and you make this election, then you have to determine a reasonable salary for yourself. Now, let's say you own a hair salon. Like when I used to own my hair salon, I didn't do hair, so I wasn't working behind the chair. Um, but I was still working. Like I was doing the back end stuff, the bookkeeping. But let's give you an example of someone who just was not working. Let's say they were just an investor only, and they made the S-Corp election. Then they wouldn't have to put themselves on salary to determine a reasonable salary, because at that point they're not providing services to the business. So that's very important. Um, and then though that salary that you're paying yourself is subject, it's letting you know it's subject to employment taxes. This is what we've talked about. If you haven't seen some of my other videos from days 1 through 12, days 1 through 11, but we really kind of touched on employment taxes and how all that stuff works. So you'll want to go back and look at one of those videos. So a key thing here is that, let me stop sharing because now I can't see myself. Okay. So so you want to make sure, like I'm going to go through the rest of the things that the document says, but essentially the IRS is telling you that if you do not take a reasonable salary, and this is important because they want to make sure that you're not abusing it. I feel like I do need to talk a little bit about this reasonable salary. So when you are, when you have your letter from the IRS saying, you have your date, your stamp, it's approved, then you are going to want to pay yourself differently, right? So you're going to have reasonable salary, and then there is distributions. And then you have profit. Okay, so these are the three things you need to be aware of. Now, your reasonable salary is going to be taxed one way, and then your distribution and your profit is going to be taxed a totally different way. And so the IRS wants to make sure that you're not abusing being taxed like this. So they want to make sure that you're taking a reasonable salary. So that's what that letter is letting you know. Like it's giving you the guidelines. It's like saying, okay, we're granting you this, but you have to follow these rules. Another thing that they make very clear is that if you abuse this, because I have seen some people, I remember this one barber came to me. He was, I asked him for his, prior year tax returns before we worked on the one we were working on. And he took a reasonable salary of $5,000. Well, actually, I'm not even going to say a reasonable because it's not reasonable. He had distributed to himself like $35,000 and took a salary of $5,000. I was like, sir, you are going to get yourself in trouble, because what the IRS can do when you do that, when you give yourself like that super, super low salary, they can recategorize those distributions as a salary. And when they do that, you're going to be taxed more, and they're going to tack on penalties and interest for doing that. So that's really the reason why you want to make sure that you are taking a reasonable salary. And so another situation, just to kind of, give you real life scenarios, because if you fall into any one of these buckets, like I don't want you to feel like you're doomed or, oh my gosh, I'm doing all this stuff wrong. Like it happens, things happen, and this is a judgment-free zone. I tell my clients that all the time, like judgment-free. But this one lady was, she had received a letter from the IRS saying that she was taxed as an S-Corp in 2024, but she didn't file as an S corp because she didn't know. And so, we are going to have to do some kind of back work to make sure that she doesn't get penalized. Because another thing about that paperwork, once you get that election, now you're responsible for informational returns. And if you don't submit them, the IRS can penalize you. And I've seen penalties up to $1,600 for not filing, the forms. So really important there. And so yeah, I went over that. So then let's see. The only other thing that the IRS wants to make clear is that this has to relate to all of the owners if they provide services. So if you are in a partnership and that partnership is taxed as an S corp, then and both people work behind the chair, both people are working or managing the salon or whatever, then you do want to make sure that both of you are taking a reasonable salary. And that's something that we provide our clients every year. Like when they are our monthly clients, anyone who's taxed as an S corp, we give them a reasonable salary report every year so that they can, we can keep it in their file so it's defensible. If the IRS ever comes back and says, well, why did you pay yourself this much? We can always go back to that report that we file for them annually, and it'll be defendable in front of the IRS. So if you are a hairstylist or barber, or in the hair industry or own a hair business, and you think your tax is an S corp, but you're not sure, what I would recommend is calling the IRS and asking them, if you don't have that letter that I showed you, if you do not have it, it's one of those things you want to keep in your records. So I 100% recommend calling the IRS, and you can ask, like, say, I want to confirm if I am taxed as an S corp, and they will let you know if you are. And I also recommend asking them to send you that letter. Now, here's a little trick. When it comes to the IRS, they a little old school. And if, like I have fax to email, or, so I can get the faxes immediately. Because who does a real fax? Like, let me know in the comments, even if you're watching this on replay, who the heck gets paper faxed to them, like physical paper? Who does that? I don't know anybody that does that. But the IRS will literally ask you, if you say you want them to fax it to you, and it's like going to your email, they were like, is the fax machine near you? Are you going to be the one receiving the fax physically? Just say yes. Because if it's going to your email, well, you know what? I'm sorry. Nope, you're not going to hold me accountable. Nope, you can tell them whatever you want. I'm just telling you what I tell them. I tell them, yes, I'm going to be the one receiving the paper physically. And then they fax it to me. Because if you say no, they're going to say, oh, well, we're not authorized to fax this to you then. If you're not going to be the one physically getting that piece of paper off that fax machine that's like ancient years old, then they're not going to send it to you. And they're going to say, well, we're going to mail it to you. And who wants to wait 2-3 weeks for something to come in the mail? No, thank you. Anyway, I digress. But you can ask them to send you a copy, and that is definitely a letter you want to keep for the entirety of your business. It's that important. And then also, but if you are, in the hair industry and you've been, in business, and you want to know if the S corp is something that you should be looking at or maybe getting, I'm going to leave the link in the description if you want to reach out to me and see if that's something that makes sense for you in 2026, or or maybe you need help figuring out if you are taxed as an S corp. I'm going to leave the link below so that you can get in contact with me or someone from my team. Love to help you, for any coaching, advisory, bookkeeping, or accounting needs, tax needs that you have. And again, my name is Jennifer Drew, founder and CEO of Hair CEO, simplifying profits and taxes for self-employed hair professionals and beauty business owners. And I will see you tomorrow for another episode of the 2026 Tax Talk.